there's a number of facets of the Christian faith which I argue provide we might say the necessary preconditions for knowledge, and as well as shaping how knowledge works out or what it looks like in the Christian life. So the fact that this world is created means that the world isn't just subject to being whatever we want it to be. It is what it is. We come into the world created beings. We come into the world, there's a world there, not of our own making. We can shape it, but it resists our shaping as well. So there's a real world. It is not an illusion. We've been made both to know the world and to do something in the world, to work and keep the garden. So the doctrine of creation provides all sorts of reasons for affirming that real knowledge is possible. Now, sin, at least in classic Protestant evangelical theology, sin, we talk about the noetic effects of the fall, or the fact that sin affects our knowing. So we don't always know as we ought to know as fallen beings. Our knowing is hindered, hampered, shaped by, limited by, not just being finite creatures, but the fact that we're sinful. So the Bible can speak of how we suppress the knowledge of God, how we deceive ourselves, how in 2 Corinthians 4, how the evil one blinds us and keeps us from seeing the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. So you have creation, you have sin, but when the Bible speaks of redemption, it's interesting, passages like Colossians 1, 20, 21, 22, we see that there's an effect of sin on our thinking, right? So we're hostile in mind, the way Paul says it in Colossians 1. We're hostile in mind to the things of God. But in that same passage in Colossians 1, it's the cross which also redeems all of who we are, including our minds. So I think you can make the case that in a biblical theology of the mind, the cross redeems us. Jesus buys us on the cross. He redeems us. And as that's applied to us, both at conversion and throughout our lives, there's a real sense in which it is the blood of Christ shed for us, which allows us to think as we ought, even to reason as we ought, and allows us to really think God's thoughts after Him. And so part of my interest is to work out how a classic reformational evangelical understanding of the gospel, in particular the death of Christ, as well as being raised up. Here, speaking of the death of Christ, it is that reality which allows us to really think and reason as we ought to. But so you have creation, you have fall, you have redemption, but also Paul can speak as far as consummation, kind of classic Reformation, creation, fall, redemption, consummation. It's also, Paul can speak of our ultimate destiny in 1 Corinthians 13:12. He can speak of our ultimate destiny being one day seeing God face to face. And what I've argued here and there is that it's really because of what's happened outside of us in the gospel, that death, burial, resurrection of Jesus outside of us leads to a change in us throughout our lives, culminating in one day seeing God face to face. And my argument is that seeing God face to face, it's not, we might say, simply intellectual or cognitive, but it's not less than that. God's a person or a tripersonal being. He has a will. He's given commands. So He's a personal God that we know. And part of that face-to-face vision, I believe, will be some sense knowing God, and that includes to some degree our minds. And I think we're only truly fitted for that one day face-to-face vision when the gospel's transformed and shaped us and cleansed us.